I survived the illness. That alone should have been my greatest battle. For 3 long months, I fought infections, weakness, and nights where the machines beside my hospital bed sounded louder than my own thoughts. There were evenings when I wasn't sure I would see the morning. But every single day, I whispered the same promise to myself. Margaret, you are going home. Home. Not just a building. My house. The house my late husband and I bought 32 years ago when Daniel was still a little boy running through empty rooms. The house we painted together. The house I finished paying for alone after cancer took him from me. Every mortgage payment. Every tax bill. Every repair. That house was not just property. It was proof of endurance. Daniel visited often while I was in the hospital. He held my hand. He adjusted my blanket. He told the nurses he would handle everything. I'll take care of it, Mom, he would say. You just focus on getting better. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. The day I was discharged, I felt fragile but hopeful. The sun was bright. The air smelled like freedom. Daniel insisted on driving me home himself. I want you to relax, he said. He carried my small hospital bag and walked slowly beside me as we approached the front door. But halfway up the driveway, something felt off. The flowers by the porch were gone. The wind chime I loved was missing. Even the welcome mat had been replaced. It said new beginnings. I didn't like that. Still, I reached into my purse and pulled out my key. The key that had opened that door for over 3 decades. I placed it into the lock. Turned it. It didn't move. I tried again. Nothing. The metal felt unfamiliar. Cold. Wrong. I looked at Daniel. He wasn't looking at me. Mom, he said slowly, we need to talk. That sentence has never brought good news. A quiet chill moved through my chest. What do you mean? I asked. Before he could answer, the door opened from the inside. Vanessa stood there. Inside. In my house. She stepped out confidently, arms folded like she had been waiting. Margaret, she said gently, almost rehearsed, we've been thinking. This house is too much for you now. Too many stairs. Too much maintenance. You need something smaller. Safer. Safer. I stared at her. Then at Daniel. Open the door, I said calmly. Daniel hesitated. And in that pause, I understood everything. The locks were changed, he admitted quietly. Changed. While I was in the hospital. Recovering. Fighting to live. My own son had changed the locks on my house. For a moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt humiliation. I was standing in my driveway, weak, freshly discharged, holding a key that no longer belonged anywhere. You changed my locks? I asked. Daniel sighed as if I were being unreasonable. We're thinking about selling the house, Mom. It's too big. It makes sense financially. We'll invest the money. Plan for the future. The future. I looked at him carefully. Whose future? I asked. He didn't answer. Because the truth was clear. No one had asked me. No one had included me. They had decided for me. While I was in a hospital bed. Vanessa spoke again, softer this time. You shouldn't be stressing yourself with property at your age. At your age. The words settled heavily in the air. In that moment, I understood something important. They thought illness had made me fragile. They thought age had made me irrelevant. They thought love had made me blind. I stood there quietly, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. Inside, something shifted. Not anger. Strength. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that calculates. Daniel believed I was helpless. Vanessa believed I was outdated. But they both forgot something very simple. I never added Daniel's name to that house. Not after my husband died. Not after the mortgage was paid. Not ever. My name was the only name on that deed. And they were standing inside my property. Without permission. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I did not beg. Instead, I looked at my son, the same boy who once needed help tying his shoes on that very porch, and I asked him one calm question. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? He mistook my calmness for weakness. He thought the conversation was over. He had no idea. It had just begun. And that was the moment my real recovery started. If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button right now. And in the comments, tell me which country you're watching from, globe showing Europe, Africa. I love seeing how far these stories reach. The more you engage, the more powerful stories I'll bring just for you. That night, I did not sleep in my house. My own house. Instead, Daniel drove me across town to Vanessa's cousin's apartment. It was a small guest room with pale walls and a single narrow window that faced another building. No pictures. No memories. No history. Temporary, he said. For your own good, he repeated, as if saying it twice made it true. I nodded. But silence does not mean agreement. And it certainly does not mean surrender. When he left, I sat slowly on the edge of the unfamiliar bed. My body was still weak from illness. My legs ached. My chest felt tight. But the pain inside me was no longer physical. It was clarity. Daniel believed he had taken control of the situation. He believed I was too tired to question him. Too fragile to resist. Too grateful to object. But while he was rearranging my furniture and discussing sale prices, something else was happening quietly. I was remembering. 12 years earlier, when my husband was dying, we had one final serious conversation. It wasn't about fear. It wasn't about regret. It was about protection. He squeezed my hand and said, Margaret, love your son. Support him. But never give away what protects you. Not even out of love. At the time, I thought he meant emotional strength. Later, I understood he meant ownership. After he passed, several people told me to add Daniel's name to the deed. It will make things easier in the future, they said. Daniel mentioned it too. Just in case something happens, he would say casually. But something in me always resisted. Not because I didn't trust him. But because I understood something important. Responsibility and love are not the same thing. So I kept the deed exactly as it was. The house was paid off in full. By me. Every mortgage payment. Every tax installment. Every broken pipe. Every roof repair. Daniel had never paid toward it. Not once. And now he was planning to sell it. Without asking. Without informing. Without permission. The next morning, I called him. My voice was calm. Daniel, send me a copy of the sales agreement. There was silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. Mom, you don't need to worry about paperwork, he finally replied. That sentence told me everything. There was paperwork. There were discussions. There were signatures being planned. Plans were moving forward. And I was being quietly removed from them. I'd still like to see it, I said. We're just exploring options, he answered quickly. It's what's best. Best for whom? Because I had not been included in that decision. Later that afternoon, I called Vanessa. Not to argue. To observe. Vanessa, I asked gently, do you know whose name is on the deed? She laughed softly. Daniel is handling all of that. That was not an answer. And her confidence told me something else. They never checked. They assumed. They assumed illness meant mental decline. They assumed weakness meant incapacity. They assumed motherhood meant automatic surrender. But assumptions collapse in the presence of documents. That evening, I reached into my hospital bag and removed my old leather folder. I always traveled with copies of important records. Insurance policies. Bank statements. Property documents. And then I unfolded the deed summary. Margaret Whitmore. Sole owner. Clear title. No co-owner. No amendment. No transfer. I read it slowly. Then again. Then one more time. Not because I doubted it, but because I needed to feel the truth strengthen my spine. Daniel wasn't just being careless. He was being reckless. Attempting to list a property without the owner's consent is not a misunderstanding. It is a mistake. A serious one. And in that quiet room, something changed inside me. I stopped feeling like a patient. And started feeling like the owner again. The painful realization finally settled in. This was never about protecting me. It was about control. Control disguised as concern. Control wrapped in phrases like "Mom, trust me." Control presented as responsibility. But true responsibility does not replace someone without their knowledge. The next morning, I made one call. Not emotional. Not reactive. Intentional. "Mr. Klein," I said when he answered. He had been our family lawyer for years. He knew the property. He knew the paperwork. "Yes, Margaret? I believe my son has attempted to remove me from my own home." There was a pause. Paper shuffling. "Did you sign anything?" he asked carefully. "No." "Did you authorize a sale?" "No." Another pause. Then his tone shifted. Calm. "Certain." "Good," he said. "That makes this very simple." Simple. Such a quiet word for such a loud mistake. He explained the legal implications carefully. Unauthorized lock changes. Illegal exclusion of a property owner. Attempted sale without consent. Each phrase restored something inside me. Strength. Authority. Ground. When the call ended, I did not feel angry. I felt prepared. They had locked the door. But they never checked who owned the house. And that was their first real mistake. 3 days later, Daniel received a letter. Not from me. From my lawyer. It arrived by registered mail, official, stamped, and impossible to ignore. The kind of envelope that feels heavy before you even open it. I wasn't there when he tore it open. But I didn't need to be. Because my phone began ringing less than 20 minutes later. Over and over. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom, what is this?" Daniel demanded. His voice had changed. The confidence was gone. In its place was something sharp and unstable. Fear. I kept my tone steady. "What does it say?" There was rustling paper on the other end. His breathing sounded tight. Then he started reading aloud. Unauthorized lock change, illegal exclusion of lawful property owner, immediate restoration of property access, notice of potential civil damages. He stopped. The silence that followed was thick. "You went to a lawyer?" he asked finally. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. "I went to protect what belongs to me." Another long pause. As if he was trying to process something he never thought would happen. The letter was clear. Precise. Direct. Daniel had 24 hours to restore my access to the property. Provide written acknowledgement of my sole ownership. Immediately withdraw any listing or sale discussions. Remove his personal belongings from the premises. Failure to comply would result in formal legal proceedings. And legal proceedings would not be small. Because attempting to remove a homeowner from their own property without consent is not a family disagreement. It is a violation. A serious one. "Mom, this is extreme," Daniel said. "We were just trying to help." Help. The word sounded almost rehearsed. Before I could respond, another call came in. "Vanessa." I answered. Her tone was softer now. Polished. Careful. "Margaret, I think this has gone too far," she said gently. "We were only thinking about your health." "My health?" I asked quietly. "Yes. The stairs. The maintenance. The stress." "You changed the locks," I interrupted. Silence. That was the only answer needed. "You listed the house without my signature," I continued. "You planned a sale I never approved." Another silence. Because there is no way to make that sound generous. That wasn't help. It was strategy. And the strategy had failed. That evening, Daniel showed up at the apartment where I was staying. He looked different. The posture was gone. The certainty had dissolved. He looked like someone who had just realized he misunderstood the rules of the game. "Mom," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway, "why didn't you just talk to me?" I looked at him carefully. "I did," I said calmly. "You changed the locks." His jaw tightened. "That wasn't supposed to be permanent." "But it happened," I replied. "And actions speak louder than intentions." He ran his hand through his hair, pacing slightly. "You didn't have to bring lawyers into this." "Yes," I said softly. "I did. Because once trust is replaced with control, protection becomes necessary." The next morning, under instruction from my lawyer, a locksmith arrived at my house. Not Daniel's locksmith. Mine. There is something powerful about watching a lock that was placed against you being removed legally. The sound of metal turning. The quiet click as it comes free. By noon, the unauthorized locks were gone. By evening, new locks were installed. Secure. Documented. Registered. And this time only one master key existed. Mine. Daniel called again that night. His voice was smaller now. "You embarrassed me," he said. I almost smiled at the irony. Illness did not embarrass me. Standing in my own driveway, unable to enter my own house, that embarrassed me. Protecting myself did not. "You tried to remove me from my own home," I replied evenly. "What did you expect me to do?" He had no answer. Because there is no acceptable explanation for locking your mother out of her property. That night, for the first time since I left the hospital, I slept peacefully. Not because the conflict was over. But because the illusion was. The power had shifted. It was no longer assumed. It was documented. It was printed in black ink. It was recorded in county records. Margaret Elaine Whitmore. Sole owner. No confusion. No co-signature. No shared authority. Daniel had finally seen it in writing. And writing does not argue. He thought I was weak. He thought illness had reduced me. He thought age had softened me. But he forgot something important. Strength is not loud. It does not shout in driveways. It does not argue on porches. Sometimes, strength arrives in an envelope. And changes everything. The morning I returned to my house, the sky was unusually calm. No wind. No clouds racing overhead. Just a stillness that felt deliberate. As if the world itself had paused to watch what would happen next. Mr. Klein had handled everything. The paperwork was finalized. The locksmith had completed his work. The legal notice had been delivered and acknowledged. On paper, the house was mine again. But this wasn't about paper. This was about presence. When the car stopped at the curb, I remained seated for a moment, looking at the front door. 32 years of life stood behind it. Birthdays. Arguments. Christmas mornings. My husband laughing in the kitchen. Daniel running down the staircase as a boy. How did something built with love turn into something defended by law? I stepped out. Daniel was standing on the porch. His posture was different. Not dominant. Not defensive. Just uncertain. His hands were clasped together. His shoulders slightly lowered. His eyes searching mine for direction. Vanessa was gone. Of course she was. Support is loud when things are easy. It becomes very quiet when consequences arrive. Daniel spoke first. Mom. I didn't think you would actually go through with it. I walked slowly toward him. You already went through with it, I replied calmly. He swallowed. For the first time since this began, I saw hesitation in him. Not arrogance. Not entitlement. Hesitation. We stepped inside together. The house felt familiar, but disturbed, like a room after furniture has been dragged across the floor. The sofa had been repositioned. The dining table was angled differently. And then I saw something that tightened my chest. My husband's photograph had been removed from its place above the fireplace. It was sitting on a side shelf. Half hidden. That hurt more than the locks. More than the letter. More than the driveway humiliation. I walked over quietly, lifted the frame, and wiped the glass with my sleeve. Daniel watched in silence. I returned the photograph to its original place. Centered. Respected. Visible. Then I turned to him. You tried to sell this house, I said softly. He exhaled sharply. I thought it was smarter. You were sick. The house is big. Maintenance is expensive. I was thinking long-term. No, I corrected him gently. You were thinking control. He stiffened slightly. That's not fair. What wasn't fair, I said evenly, was changing the locks while I was in a hospital bed. The words settled heavily between us. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the living room. I was scared, he admitted quietly. I thought I might lose you. That was the first honest sentence he had spoken. Fear. That I understood. But fear does not justify removal. Being afraid doesn't give you ownership, I replied. He looked around the room slowly. I grew up here. Yes, I said. And you were always welcome. The difference between welcome and entitled is subtle. But powerful. I reached into my bag and handed him the formal document. You have 30 days to remove your belongings. His eyes widened. You're serious? Yes. You're choosing the house over me? I shook my head gently. I'm choosing boundaries. Silence filled the room again. Thick. Unavoidable. He sat down heavily on the couch. I thought you were too weak to manage everything, he confessed. There it was. The truth. You decided that for me, I replied. Without asking. He looked up at me, not as a child, not as a controller, but as a man who realized he had crossed a line. I didn't think you'd fight back, he said quietly. I almost smiled. Strength doesn't disappear just because someone is sick. He stared at the floor. And for the first time, I saw something more important than apology. Understanding. I walked toward the door. He followed. Before opening it, I turned fully toward him. There will come a day when this house is yours, I said. His eyes lifted. But you tried to take that day early. And that is a mistake many people regret. Deeply. He nodded once. No argument. No shouting. Just consequence. He stepped outside. And when the door closed behind him, I stood still for a moment. The house felt different now. Not tense. Not threatened. Secure. I walked through each room slowly. Touching walls. Straightening frames. Reclaiming space. When I reached the front door again, I locked it. With my key. The click echoed softly through the hallway. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was final. And this time, it felt earned. The house is quiet again. Not the heavy silence of conflict. Not the uncomfortable quiet of tension. But the peaceful kind. The kind that feels earned. The furniture is back where it belongs. The curtains are open in the mornings. The garden is slowly growing again, small green shoots pushing through the soil, steady and patient. My husband's photograph hangs above the fireplace, centered and respected. Everything feels familiar again. But something important has changed. Respect has returned. Daniel moved into a small apartment across town. It isn't large, but it's his. For the first 2 weeks after he left, he didn't call. Maybe pride kept him quiet. Maybe embarrassment. Maybe both. I didn't chase him. Some lessons need space. Then one evening, as I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset, my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. I answered. His voice sounded different. Not defensive. Not impatient. Just honest. "Mom," he said softly, "I messed up." I didn't interrupt him. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone is silence. "I thought you were too weak to handle everything." He continued. "When you were in the hospital, I thought I had to take control. I thought I was helping. But I didn't ask you. I didn't listen." That was the first time he admitted the truth clearly. Control had replaced communication. Fear had replaced trust. "I was scared," he said. "I thought I might lose you. And I panicked." Fear can change people. It can make them act too quickly. It can make them justify decisions they would never normally make. But fear does not excuse disrespect. "I understand that you were afraid," I told him calmly. "But help does not begin with locks." There was a long pause. Then he said something that mattered more than an apology. "I forgot that it was your house." Yes. He did. He forgot that the name on the deed was not just ink on paper. It represented years of sacrifice. Years of mortgage payments made on time. Years of working late. Years of choosing responsibility over comfort. Illness may have weakened my body for a while. But it never removed my ownership. And it never removed my voice. After that conversation, something slowly began to change between us. Daniel started visiting again. But this time, he knocked before entering. He asked before making suggestions. He listened when I spoke. Not because he was afraid of me. But because he understood something important now. Respect is not automatic. It is earned. And once it is broken, it must be rebuilt carefully. We talk more honestly these days. Not as a mother who is expected to surrender. Not as a son who assumes authority. But as two adults who understand boundaries. The house still stands strong. But so do I. In the evenings, I sit on the porch and breathe deeply. The air feels different now, lighter. Because I didn't just recover from illness. I recovered from being underestimated. That experience taught me something I will never forget. Love without boundaries becomes control. And control without ownership eventually collapses. There is nothing wrong with helping family. There is nothing wrong with planning for the future. But there is something wrong with removing someone from decisions about their own life. Ownership matters. Dignity matters. Voice matters. Daniel understands that now. And perhaps, in a strange way, this conflict saved something important between us. It forced honesty. It forced growth. It forced clarity. And sometimes clarity is uncomfortable before it becomes valuable. The deed still carries one name. Margaret Elaine Whitmore. Not because I wanted power, but because I earned it. And this time everyone remembers that. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the next powerful story. And in the comments, tell me which country you're watching from, globe showing Europe, Africa. I truly love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. The more you engage, the more powerful stories I'll bring just for you. And before you go, tell me honestly. If you were in Margaret's position, would you forgive him completely? Or would you never trust him the same way again? I read every single comment.